In the grand saga of Rome, a city built by gods and governed by giants, one name echoes through the ages with unparalleled reverence. It is the name of an emperor who was more than a ruler. He was a legend in his own lifetime. This man was Trajan. The Senate bestowed upon him a title, Optimus Princeps, the best ruler. This wasn't mere flattery or political maneuvering. It was a heartfelt declaration of respect for a leader who expanded the empire to its greatest extent, governed with justice, and won the genuine affection of his people. From the highest patrician to the humblest plebeian, Trajan's reign marked the zenith of Roman might. Under his command, the legions marched farther than ever before. He was a soldier's emperor, a man who understood the grit and grime of the frontier because he had lived it. He ate the same coarse bread as his legionaries. He marched alongside them under the punishing sun. He shared their dangers on the battlefield. This bond, forged in loyalty and mutual respect, was the bedrock of his military success. His conquests were not just territorial gains. They were epic tales of courage, strategy, and relentless determination that would be carved into stone for all eternity. But his greatness was not confined to the battlefield. Back in Rome, his name was synonymous with prosperity and monumental ambition. He built forums, markets, aqueducts. He initiated vast social welfare programs, ensuring that the children of the poor were fed and cared for. While other emperors were feared, Trajan was admired. While others ruled from the seclusion of opulent palaces, Trajan walked among the people, a visible and reassuring presence in the bustling streets of his city. He was a builder, a conqueror, and a father to his people. This is the story of how that man, Marcus Ulpius Traianus, rose from the sun-drenched hills of Hispania to the pinnacle of Roman power. It is a tale of epic wars that pushed the boundaries of the known world, of gladiatorial games that dazzled the masses, and of architectural marvels that still stand as a testament to Rome's golden age. We will journey with him from the barracks of the frontier legions to the gilded halls of the Palatine Hill. We will stand with his soldiers at the great siege of Sarmizegetusa and witness the grand triumph that celebrated his victory. This is the story of Rome's greatest emperor and the world he forged. Imagine Rome at the close of the 1st century. It is the heart of the world, a sprawling metropolis of over 1 million souls. Its grandeur is breathtaking. Gleaming marble temples dedicated to Jupiter, Juno and Minerva crown the Capitoline Hill, their golden roofs shining like a beacon of imperial power. The Colosseum, a colossal monument to Roman engineering and spectacle, stands proudly in the valley below, its tiered seats capable of holding 50,000 spectators, roaring for blood and glory. Aqueducts like giant stone serpents snake across the countryside, carrying fresh water from distant hills to feed the city's countless fountains, baths, and private villas. The air hums with energy, a chaotic symphony of rumbling carts, shouting merchants, and the ceaseless murmur of a dozen different languages. This city is a place of staggering contrasts, a dazzling mosaic of wealth and poverty living side by side. Opulent mansions of senators and equestrians, adorned with intricate mosaics and lush gardens, stand just a stone's throw away from towering, rickety insulae. In these precarious wooden structures, families were crammed into single windowless rooms, and the constant threat of fire or collapse was a daily reality. The stench from the crowded streets, a mixture of street food, sweat, and overflowing sewers, was a stark reminder of the harsh realities of urban life for the majority of Rome's inhabitants. Yet they were all Romans, bound by a shared identity and a fierce pride in their city. Life in Rome was a spectacle. The Forum Romanum was the city's political and social epicenter, a chaotic plaza where senators debated laws, lawyers argued cases, and citizens gathered to hear the latest news and gossip. Processions, religious and military, frequently wound their way through its crowded paths. But the ultimate spectacle was the games. In the arena, gladiators, slaves, criminals and volunteers fought to the death for the entertainment of the masses. Chariot races in the Circus Maximus, the largest stadium ever built, drew hundreds of thousands of frenzied fans, their loyalties to the blue faction, green faction, red faction and white faction as fierce as any political allegiance. These events were more than entertainment. They were a display of the emperor's generosity and the empire's power. Beneath the surface of this vibrant, chaotic city, however, lay a current of danger and uncertainty. The Praetorian Guard, the emperor's elite bodyguards, were a powerful and often unpredictable force, capable of making or breaking an emperor. Political intrigue was a constant threat, with ambitious senators and jealous relatives plotting in the shadows. The mob, the plebs of Rome, could be swayed by bread and circuses, but their mood was fickle. If the grain supply failed or an emperor lost their favor, their cheers could quickly turn to riots. This was the Rome that awaited its next master, a city of unparalleled glory and ever-present peril, a prize of immense value and immense risk. Before the dawn of Trajan's golden age, Rome endured a period of darkness. The city lived under the thumb of Emperor Domitian, the last of the Flavian dynasty. His reign had begun with promise, but it descended into a paranoid tyranny that cast a long, chilling shadow over the Senate and the people. Domitian saw conspiracies in every corner and treachery in every whisper. The atmosphere in the capital grew thick with fear. Senators who had served the state for decades suddenly found themselves accused of treason on the flimsiest of pretexts, their property confiscated and their lives forfeit. The network of informers, the dreaded delatores, thrived, growing rich by denouncing their fellow citizens. No one felt safe. A careless word at a dinner party or a perceived slight could lead to a summons before the emperor, a man whose judgment was swift and often fatal. Domitian demanded to be addressed as Dominus et Deus, Master and God, a title that grated on the traditional sensibilities of the Roman aristocracy. He ruled not as the first among equals, but as an absolute monarch, isolating himself in his vast palace on the Palatine Hill. His paranoia extended to his own family and his closest advisors. The very air in the corridors of power seemed poisoned with suspicion, and the once proud Senate was reduced to a rubber stamp for the emperor's increasingly erratic whims. The people of Rome were kept distracted by lavish games and building projects, but even they felt the oppressive weight of the regime. Domitian's efficiency in administration could not mask his cruelty. Summary executions and the public disgrace of prominent families became unsettlingly common. He paid the military well and led some successful campaigns, but his arrogance and distrust alienated many senior commanders. The legions on the frontiers, men like Trajan, watched the events in Rome with growing unease. They were loyal to the idea of Rome, but their loyalty to the man on the throne was strained to its breaking point. Finally, in the year 96, the tension snapped. A conspiracy, born within the walls of the imperial palace itself, involving his own wife and court officials, brought an end to the terror. Domitian was assassinated, his statues were torn down, and the Senate officially condemned his memory, a process known as damnatio memoriae. His name was chiseled off public monuments in an attempt to erase his reign from history. The relief was immense, but it left a power vacuum and a desperate question. Who could possibly heal the deep wounds left by the tyranny? Rome needed a leader, but not another tyrant. It needed a man of integrity, a man of the people, a man of the army. In the chaotic aftermath of Domitian's fall, the Senate moved quickly to restore order. They chose an elderly, respected senator, Marcus Cocceius Nerva. Nerva was a safe choice. He was childless. He posed no threat to powerful families. He represented a return to old Republican values. He immediately reversed the worst policies, recalling exiles, ending treason trials, pledging never to execute a senator. It was a breath of fresh air. Rome could breathe again. However, Nerva's position was precarious. He lacked military support. The Praetorian Guard seethed with resentment. They saw Nerva as weak and imposed by hated senators. A year in, the Praetorians mutinied, storming the palace. They seized the elderly emperor. They demanded Domitian's assassins be executed, and Nerva, powerless, complied. Humiliation, without the army, an emperor is a puppet. Realizing his mortality, Nerva made one crucial decision. He needed an heir with the legion's loyalty. He looked beyond Rome to the frontiers. He chose a man not from the Italian heartland, but from the province of Hispania. A respected governor of Upper Germany, a seasoned general adored by his soldiers, Marcus Ulpius Trajanus. In a public ceremony, Nerva adopted Trajan as son and heir. The choice stabilized politics instantly. The army celebrated, Praetorians in Rome, legions on the Danube, legions on the Rhine. The Senate approved overwhelmingly. For the first time, Rome would be ruled by a man not born in Italy, a true provincial. It signaled a new era, leadership beyond the city. Hope arrived from the frontier camps, not the gilded palaces. The stage was set for Trajan's ascent. Far from the marble heart of Rome, in the sun-baked province of Hispania Baetica, a new kind of Roman was being forged. This was the homeland of Marcus Ulpius Trajanus. He was born in the year 53 in the city of Italica, a Roman settlement founded generations earlier by the veterans of Scipio Africanus. While he was not of the ancient patrician bloodlines of Rome, his family was prominent and deeply respected in the province. His father, also named Marcus Ulpius Trajanus, was a distinguished senator and a successful general in his own right, the first of his family to enter the hallowed halls of the Roman Senate. Trajan grew up breathing the air of a province that was thoroughly Roman, yet distinctly its own, a place where loyalty to the empire was fierce and unwavering. His childhood was not one of pampered luxury in a capital villa, but one spent amidst the rolling hills and olive groves of southern Hispania. He learned to ride horses almost as soon as he could walk, developing a physical toughness and a love for the outdoors that would stay with him for his entire life. He was educated in the Roman tradition, studying rhetoric, law, Livy, and Tacitus. But his true classroom was the world of provincial administration and military life. He saw firsthand how the empire was governed, not from the abstract perspective of the Senate House, but from the practical, day-to-day reality of a frontier province. This upbringing gave him a unique perspective, blending the rugged self-reliance of a provincial with the sophisticated education of a Roman aristocrat. This provincial origin was a defining aspect of Trajan's character. He was a product of the empire itself, a testament to Rome's success in assimilating and elevating talented individuals from across its vast territories. Unlike the emperors who came before him, his identity was not tied exclusively to the city of Rome. He understood the vital importance of the provinces, the sources of the empire's soldiers, its grain, and its wealth. This understanding would later shape his policies as emperor, leading him to invest in infrastructure and development far beyond the borders of Italy. He was living proof that to be Roman was no longer a matter of geography, but of culture, loyalty, and service to the state. The family's ambition was centered on service to Rome. His father's career was a shining example. The elder Trajan had governed provinces and commanded legions, earning a triumph for his victories in the east. Young Trajan was expected to follow this path of honor and duty. There was no question that his destiny lay in the army and, if he proved worthy, in the politics of the empire. He embarked on his career with a solid foundation, a respected family name, a robust education, and a deep-seated sense of responsibility. From these humble yet proud provincial beginnings, the man who would one day be called the best ruler began his steady, determined climb up the ladder of Roman power. Trajan's path to greatness began where all ambitious Roman careers started, in the military. At around the age of 19, he was commissioned as a military tribune, held by young men of the senatorial class and held by young men of the equestrian class. This was his first taste of life in the legions, and he took to it with natural ease. He served under his father, governor of Syria, on the border with the Parthian Empire. He witnessed the complex dance of diplomacy, espionage, and brute force required to keep the peace and protect Rome's interests. He did not command from a comfortable tent behind the lines. Trajan immersed himself completely in the life of a soldier. He was known for his incredible stamina and for sharing the hardships of his men. He marched with them on long patrols under the Syrian sun, inspected their gear with a meticulous eye, learned their names and learned their stories. This wasn't a popularity play, it was his nature. He respected the discipline and endurance of the common legionary and believed authority must be earned, not just granted. The soldiers saw in him a leader who understood them, a commander who led from the front. After Syria, his career progressed through military and administrative posts. He commanded legions on the Rhine frontier, defending against Germanic tribes, probing Rome's defences. Warfare there differed from the east. It was a gritty struggle in dense forests across wide rivers, fought in ambushes and raids rather than grand pitched battles. There, Trajan honed his tactics and logistics, learning to supply and maneuver large bodies of troops. He earned a reputation as calm and decisive, never panicking in crisis, able to anticipate his enemy's moves. Under the tyrant Domitian, Trajan navigated politics with care. While others fell to paranoia, Trajan focused on duties, keeping distance from court intrigues in Rome. His competence and loyalty made him too valuable to discard. In 91, he was rewarded with the consulship, the highest office in Rome. It marked his arrival at the upper echelons of power. No longer just a provincial general, he became one of the empire's most senior, respected figures, admired by the army and by the Senate. What made Trajan so remarkable was his ability to bridge two different worlds. He possessed the tough, practical mindset of a career soldier, yet he carried himself with the dignity and respect for tradition expected of a Roman senator. In an age when the military and the political class were often at odds, Trajan commanded the respect of both. When he spoke in the Senate, his words were direct, sensible, backed by a lifetime of experience. The senators listened. He was a man of action, not empty rhetoric. They saw a leader who valued the Senate as an institution, a stark contrast to Domitian's contempt. His physical presence was commanding, tall and powerfully built, a weathered face from long years on campaign. Yet he was approachable and affable. Unlike many aristocratic peers, he was not arrogant or aloof. He treated men from all walks of life with simple, unpretentious courtesy. He could share a coarse joke with a legionary and debate points of law with a jurist. This rugged authority, paired with humility, was incredibly appealing. It disarmed potential rivals and won him allies. People trusted him because he felt authentic, a man whose character was as solid as the granite of a Roman road. His life was a model of traditional Roman virtues. He was known for his discipline, his sense of duty, pietas, and his personal integrity. While some emperors indulged in lavish decadence, Trajan lived a life that was surprisingly modest. He enjoyed hunting and the outdoors, but he had little time for extravagant banquets and opulent displays of wealth. This moderation was not an act. It was fundamental to his character. It further endeared him to the common people and the soldiers, who saw him as one of them. His reputation for justice and fairness was legendary long before he ever wore the imperial purple. This blend of military prowess and senatorial gravitas made him ideal to heal divisions. Soldiers saw him as their ultimate commander, a man who had shared their toils and would lead them to glory. The Senate saw him as a partner, a princeps who would restore their dignity and govern in cooperation with them, not as an autocrat. He did not have to scheme or plot for power. His reputation preceded him. He had spent decades building a foundation of trust and respect through diligent service. By the time Nerva was looking for an heir, Trajan was not just a possible choice. He was the obvious and only logical one. In the year 97, Trajan held one of the most critical posts in the empire, governor of Upper Germany. This was not a quiet, peaceful province. It was the front line. He was in command of a massive army, a concentration of some of the finest legions in the Roman military, tasked with defending the long and porous Rhine frontier. This was a position of immense power and responsibility. The man who controlled the German legions effectively held the fate of the Western Empire in his hands. It was a command given only to the most trusted and capable generals, and Trajan had earned it through decades of unwavering service and proven battlefield competence. His headquarters was likely at Mogontiacum, which is modern-day Mainz, a major legionary fortress and a hub of military activity. From here, he managed the complex logistics of the frontier. This involved not just drilling soldiers and planning defensive strategies, but also overseeing the construction of forts, roads and watchtowers that formed the lines, the fortified border of the empire. He was in his element, a hands-on commander who took a keen interest in every detail of his army's readiness. He would spend his days inspecting fortifications, presiding over training exercises, and resolving disputes among his men, always maintaining a visible and active presence. The legions on the Rhine were his legions, and their loyalty to him was absolute. It was during this time that he demonstrated his strategic vision. He was not content to simply sit and wait for barbarian incursions. Trajan believed in proactive defense. He led his forces on campaigns across the Rhine, not for conquest, but to disrupt enemy concentrations and instill a healthy fear of Roman power in the Germanic tribes. These operations were meticulously planned and executed with swift efficiency, showcasing his mastery of frontier warfare. His successes solidified his reputation as Rome's preeminent general. News of his victories on the Rhine traveled back to Rome, further enhancing his standing and making him a figure of public admiration. He was the guardian of the empire, the strong man on the frontier, keeping Rome safe. Life in the command tent was a world away from the political maneuvering of the capital. Here, merit and results were what mattered. Trajan was surrounded by a staff of loyal and highly competent officers, men he had known and trusted for years. He fostered a culture of professionalism and excellence within his command. It was in this environment, amidst the disciplined order of the German legions, that the fateful message from Rome would find him. As he focused on the security of the frontier, events hundreds of miles away were about to thrust him from the role of the empire's most powerful general to the center of the Roman world itself. The summons was coming. The news arrived in the autumn of the year 97. A dust-covered courier raced in from Rome and hands him a sealed dispatch at Trajan's tent. The message was short, but its contents were monumental. It informed Trajan he had been adopted as the emperor's son and successor. He was now Caesar, heir to the entire Roman Empire. The ceremony had already taken place in Rome. Nerva stood on the steps of the temple of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus. He publicly declared his choice to the city and the world. The decision was made. The die was cast. Trajan's reaction was typical of the man. Calm, measured, dignified. There were no wild celebrations, no immediate declarations of personal ambition. He understood the immense weight of responsibility placed on his shoulders. He stood at the peak of his military career. He commanded a powerful army loyal to him personally. He could have marched on Rome and seized power by force. But that was not Trajan's way. He accepted the honor and sent a respectful letter back to Nerva. He pledged loyalty and thanked him for his trust. His first act as heir was one of duty, not pride. He did not rush back to Rome to claim his new position. This was political theatre and genuine prudence. Trajan's first priority was to secure the frontiers. Leaving early could look like weakness or naked ambition. Instead, he remained in Germany. He inspected the forts. He ensured the loyalty and discipline of the legions, along the Rhine, along the Danube. He summoned his key commanders. He summoned his governors. He secured their allegiance. He made clear the transition would be orderly and stable. He showed the empire he put security and duty above personal glory. This patient approach sent a powerful message to the Senate and to the people of Rome. He was not eager to abandon his post for palace comforts. He knew Rome's strength lay not in the city, but on its heavily defended borders. By staying on the frontier, he solidified the army's support. He calmed fears of a new civil war. When Nerva died a few months later, in January of 98, the succession was seamless. The message reached Trajan in Cologne. Without opposition, Marcus Ulpius Traianus became master of the Roman world. Still, he did not hurry home. Rome could wait. His work on the frontier was not yet done. Word of Nerva's death in January of 98 reached Trajan in the cold, damp climate of the German frontier. He was now, by law and by the will of the gods, the absolute ruler of the Roman world. The legions hailed him as Imperator, their shouts echoing through the misty forests along the Rhine. Yet Trajan did not immediately turn his horse towards Rome. He made a decision that astonished the political elite in the capital, but solidified his reputation with the soldiers. He chose to remain on the frontier. The security of the empire came first, before the trappings of power, before the adulation of the Roman mob. The purple toga could wait. The integrity of the border could not. He spent the better part of 2 years far from the Palatine Hill. His court was a mobile command tent. His companions were his generals. His world was the forts. His world was the watchtowers. He toured not just Upper Germany, but the volatile Danube frontier. The Danube was the empire's most troublesome border, threatened by warlike tribes like the Dacians. He met with commanders. He reviewed troop deployments. He planned new roads. He planned fortifications. He was an emperor in motion, a whirlwind of military purpose. Previous emperors rushed to Rome to secure power, but Trajan stayed. His absence sent a powerful signal. He was supremely confident. His power base was the army, and the army was with him. He was a soldier first, an emperor second. He showed that provincial safety mattered as much as capital politics. He governed from a distance. Couriers galloped between his headquarters and Rome. They carried dispatches. They carried decrees. They carried appointments. He ran the bureaucracy with military efficiency. Rome could be ruled from anywhere if the leader was competent. The Senate, first perplexed, soon admired his dedication. They watched a new kind of leader emerge. Absolute, respected, remote. While his body remained on the frontier, Trajan's mind was very much on Rome. He knew his success required building ties with the Senate and neutralizing the Praetorian Guard. Soon after becoming emperor, he sent a careful letter to the senators in Rome, a masterpiece of diplomacy. He swore he would never execute a senator without a fair trial, a clear rejection of Domitian's terror. He pledged to treat the Senate as a partner in governance, respecting its ancient traditions and its authority. The anxious aristocrats were relieved. It promised dignity and security. His message to the Praetorian Guard was different. Not a letter, decisive action. He remembered their mutiny against Nerva, the humiliation of the elderly emperor, and their dangerous arrogance. Trajan would not tolerate insubordination. He summoned the Praetorian prefects and the ringleaders to his headquarters in Germany under a fake ceremony. They left Rome expecting honors and arrived at the harsh frontier. Instead, they met cold justice, seized, summarily executed. The message was brutal, public, and crystal clear. Disloyalty would not be tolerated. This single act of swift retribution echoed all the way back to the Praetorian barracks in Rome. Guardsmen realized they faced a new master, a man unafraid to use his power, who commanded the frontier legion's loyalty. Any thought of king-making vanished. Trajan decapitated their leadership without entering the capital. He appointed new commanders loyal only to him. He tamed the Praetorians from hundreds of miles away, securing his authority in Rome before arriving. 2 moves, a hand of friendship to the Senate and a fist of iron to the Praetorians. This was Trajan's style, cooperation and absolute authority. Magnanimous and respectful to allies, utterly ruthless to defiance. News spread through the city. Senators felt relief, the people felt secure, and Rome readied itself for its new emperor. Anticipation built. Even from the distant Danube, Trajan understood the fundamental rule of keeping the Roman populace happy: bread and circuses. The people of Rome, the million-strong mob, could make or break an emperor's popularity. Trajan acted quickly to ensure their well-being and their favor. One of his earliest initiatives was the expansion of the alimenta, a groundbreaking social welfare program. It used interest from imperial loans to Italian landowners to fund monthly stipends for poor children, especially orphans. It was compassionate and practical, ensuring the next generation of citizens and soldiers would be healthier and stronger, while also earning him the adoration of the common people. He also secured the grain supply. The Cura Annonai, the state grain administration, was the lifeline of the city. Any disruption could lead to riots and chaos. Trajan's streamlined administration improved ports like Ostia, secured shipping lanes, and kept wheat flowing from Egypt and Africa. The message was simple. Under Trajan, your children will be cared for and your pantries will be full. Not a tyrant buying loyalty, but a responsible father figure providing for his family, earning the informal title Father of the Fatherland in the people's hearts. A full belly wasn't enough. Trajan also knew spectacle mattered. He sponsored gladiatorial games in the Colosseum and chariot races in the Circus Maximus. More lavish and frequent than under Nerva. Exotic beasts from across the empire, gladiators clashing in epic duels, keeping crowds roaring. These spectacles displayed imperial wealth and power, reminding people of the empire's might. They celebrated his reign, even in his absence. Trajan methodically won over every segment of society before he even arrived. The army by right and camaraderie, the Senate by promise of respect and partnership, the Praetorians by decisive force, and the people by generosity and care. He built unprecedented universal goodwill. By the time his frontier work was done, Rome wasn't just ready. It was desperate to welcome the man already hailed as a savior. In the autumn of the year 99, nearly 2 years after becoming emperor, Trajan finally came home to Rome. The city was electric with anticipation. Triumphal arches were hastily erected, flowers were strewn along the route. The populace imagined a grand military procession, with the emperor on a golden chariot, surrounded by his legions, a spectacle of overwhelming power. But Trajan once again defied all expectations. He chose not to make his entrance on horseback or in a chariot. Instead, he entered the city on foot. He walked among the senators who came to greet him, shaking their hands and addressing them by name. This simple, humble act was a political masterstroke. It was a visual declaration of his style of rule. He was not a distant god-king like Domitian, nor a weak figurehead like Nerva. He was the first citizen walking among his people. The crowds that lined the streets were stunned, then ecstatic. They surged forward, not in fear, but in a wave of genuine affection. They could see him up close, a tall, imposing figure, yet kind and approachable. He greeted commoners with the same respect he showed senators. Even his wife, the Empress Plotina, mirrored his humility. Pausing at the entrance to the imperial palace on the Palatine Hill, she declared she would enter as a common woman and hoped to leave the same way. The symbolism was powerful and deliberate. By walking, Trajan placed himself on the same level as the citizens he governed. He was not lording his power over them, he was joining them. This act instantly dispelled any remaining fears of a new tyranny. It established a bond of trust and mutual respect that would define his reign. The people of Rome saw a man confident enough to reject ostentation. His power came not from guards and ceremony, but from the palpable goodwill of the people. Once inside the city, he continued this practice. He walked with only a small retinue of attendants, accessible to ordinary citizens. People approached him with petitions. He was known to listen patiently to their grievances. He moved through the forum, the markets, the public baths, a visible, reassuring presence. This was a revolutionary style of leadership. It transformed the relationship between emperor and subject, from master and servant to guardian and ward. Trajan was not just ruling Rome, he became part of its daily life, and the city loved him for it. Once established in Rome, Trajan wasted no time in implementing the reforms he had been planning. His first order of business was to dismantle the machinery of fear left over from Domitian's reign. He immediately put a stop to the treason trials that had terrorized the Senate. He rounded up the notorious delatores, the professional informers who had grown rich by false accusations. He had them publicly flogged. He exiled many to remote barren islands. Some were even placed on leaky ships and cast adrift at sea. The city saw this as fitting justice. It washed away the last stains of tyranny. With fear dispelled, he turned to justice and the economy. He was tireless and hands-on as an administrator. He personally presided over legal cases, earning a reputation for fairness. He cracked down on corruption among provincial governors. He reformed the tax code to be more equitable. He reviewed the state's finances, cutting waste and investing in public projects. Rome began to feel safer, more prosperous, better run. Trajan saw problems and planned practical solutions. He noticed chaos in shipping and supply lines. He planned a massive expansion and dredging of the port at Ostia. This project would secure Rome's food supply for generations. He saw fire-prone, rickety apartment blocks. He instituted stricter building codes to make them safer. He believed Rome's grandeur included functional infrastructure, roads, aqueducts, ports. These improvements were less glamorous than monuments, but changed daily life. He restored the dignity of the Senate. He attended meetings regularly and sat among them as an equal. He genuinely listened and encouraged open debate. He allowed the Senate to handle meaningful legislation again. Though his power was absolute, he worked through Rome's institutions. This won him the unwavering loyalty of the aristocracy. They supported a leader who treated them with respect. In short order, Trajan had won over Rome and begun to rebuild its soul. Despite the peace and prosperity he was fostering in Rome, Trajan's gaze was never far from the frontiers. His 2 years spent securing the Rhine and his 2 years spent securing the Danube borders had given him a clear picture of the empire's strategic challenges. The most significant and immediate threat lay across the Danube River in the mountainous kingdom of Dacia. This powerful realm was ruled by a formidable and cunning king named Decebalus. He had united the Dacian tribes and had even humiliated Rome, forcing Emperor Domitian to pay an annual subsidy, a shameful arrangement. Decebalus was not a typical barbarian chieftain. He was a brilliant strategist and a skilled diplomat who had welcomed Roman deserters and engineers into his kingdom, learning their methods of siegecraft and fortification. His capital, Sarmizegetusa Regia, was a network of formidable fortresses in the Carpathians. Decebalus was growing bolder, raiding Roman territory and attempting to forge a grand alliance of hostile tribes. Trajan knew the peace brought by Domitian was fragile and dishonorable. The whispers of war grew louder in Rome. Scouts and spies brought back reports of massive Dacian military preparations. Decebalus was using Roman subsidies to fund an army that would one day be turned against Rome itself. For Trajan, a soldier emperor, this situation was intolerable. The idea of paying tribute to a barbarian king was a personal and national disgrace. He saw Decebalus as an obstacle to long-term security. The Danube could not be safe with a unified Dacia across the river. The decision began to form in Trajan's mind. This would not be a punitive expedition. This would be a war of conquest. He would destroy Decebalus's kingdom and absorb it into the Roman Empire. Preparations began in earnest. New legions were raised. Veteran units were transferred to the Danube frontier. Roman military engineering was unleashed. Logisticians and surveyors planned the construction of roads, bridges, and supply depots for a full-scale invasion. The golden age of peace was about to be interrupted. The emperor, having won the hearts of his people, was now ready to show them his true calling, conqueror. The epic Dacian Wars were about to begin. The peace in Rome was a productive one, but for an emperor like Trajan, it was merely a prelude. His mind was fixed on the storm gathering beyond the Danube. The Dacian king, Decebalus, was a cancer on the frontier, bold, ambitious, growing stronger with each passing season. The shameful subsidies paid by Domitian were not just an insult, they were fuel for the fire, actively funding weapons and fortifications that would one day be used against Roman legions. Trajan, forged in the crucible of military honor, knew this could not stand. He resolved the Dacian problem required a permanent solution. This would not be a punitive raid. It would be a war of annihilation, aimed at the complete destruction of the Dacian kingdom and its absorption into the Roman Empire. Dacia was a fortress kingdom, a labyrinth of rugged mountains and dense forests. Decebalus's capital, Sarmizegetusa Regia, was ringed by hill forts. His warriors were fierce, brave, fighting on home turf. Trajan knew a half-hearted effort would mean disaster. His grand plan was meticulous and overwhelming. He would not just defeat the Dacian army, he would systematically dismantle their infrastructure, leaving Decebalus nowhere to run. It was total war. Preparations were on a scale not seen in generations. Roman military logistics were unleashed. New legions were levied. Veteran units marched in from the Rhine, from Syria, from Britannia. The total force exceeded 100,000 men. Soldiers alone were not enough. Engineers and surveyors fanned out across Moesia and Pannonia. They planned and built new roads. They constructed massive supply depots. Nothing would be left to chance. Trajan would bring the full weight of Rome down on Decebalus. Back in Rome, the mood mixed patriotic fervor and nervous anticipation. The war was popular, avenging Domitian, ending the Dacian threat. The Senate voted funds and support. Yet memories of past defeats lingered. Dacia signaled difficulty and danger. As legions gathered and army workshops rang day and night, Rome held its breath. They had placed their faith in their soldier emperor. Now he would have to prove that faith was not misplaced. The stage was set for one of Rome's greatest campaigns. In the spring of the year 101, the command was given. The war had begun. From their winter camps along the Danube, the legions began to move, a sight of awesome power and terrifying discipline. Column after column of legionaries, hobnailed sandals pounding the roads, marching toward the crossing points. Each soldier carried his own armor, his weapons, a heavy pack with tools and rations. The sun glinted off polished helmets, shafts of thousands of pila. The eagle standards held high. Trajan was not a distant commander. He was at the head of the army. He marched on foot with his men, sharing hardtack biscuit, sharing sour wine. He slept in a simple soldier's tent. First to rise, planning logistics. His leadership earned adoration and galvanized the force. They would follow him anywhere, even into the mountains of Dacia. The army was a mobile city. Cavalry from Gaul and Hispania, archers from Syria, slingers from the Balearic Islands, a massive supply train of wagons, oxen and mules, grain and arrowheads, siege engines, medical supplies. Engineers moved ahead, building temporary bridges, reinforcing roads, clearing paths through forests, a slow-moving tide of iron and order, approaching the Danube for final preparations. The army split into several columns. Trajan's strategy, a pincer movement toward the Dacian heartland, tension thick in the air. Across the swirling Danube lay enemy territory. Soldiers checking gear one last time. Jokes growing quieter. Faces grimly determined. They were ready. Under their emperor's watchful eye, they prepared to step into the lair of the wolf. To sustain a war of conquest in Dacia, Trajan needed more than a temporary pontoon crossing. He needed a permanent, all-weather lifeline that could carry a ceaseless flow of soldiers and supplies directly into the heart of enemy territory. He envisioned a structure that would not only serve his military campaign, but would also stand as an undeniable statement of Roman power and permanence. He commissioned his most brilliant architect and engineer, Apollodorus of Damascus, with a task that honestly seemed impossible: to build a massive stone bridge across the lower Danube, one of the widest and most powerful rivers in the known world. This bridge would be the linchpin of his entire strategy. For over a year, Roman engineers toiled in the swirling currents near the fortress of Drobeta. The scale of the project was just staggering. Apollodorus designed a structure over 1 kilometre long, supported by 20 colossal masonry piers. To build these piers in the middle of the powerful river, the engineers used massive wooden caissons, watertight boxes that were sunk to the riverbed. Once in place, the water was pumped out, allowing workers to lay the foundations and build the stone piers in a dry environment. It was a feat of engineering genius, honestly, combining sophisticated design with the brute force of legionary labour. Thousands of soldiers worked day and night, quarrying stone, felling timber, and battling the river itself. The result was, well, a wonder of the ancient world. The stone piers rose majestically from the water, connected by a massive wooden superstructure of arches, and a flat roadway wide enough for 2 carts to pass. The bridge at Drobeta was more than an engineering marvel. It was a psychological weapon. For the Dacians watching from the opposite bank, it must have seemed like the work of gods or giants. It was a clear and terrifying message. The Romans were not here for a brief raid. They were here to stay. Their bridge was a stake driven into the heart of Dacia, a permanent artery connecting it to the full might of the Roman Empire. When the bridge was completed in the spring of 105, ahead of the Second Dacian War, it transformed the strategic landscape. Trajan could now move his legions and supplies across the Danube at will, regardless of the weather or the season. He was no longer dependent on vulnerable pontoon bridges or a fleet of boats. He had built a Roman road directly to Decibulus's doorstep. This bridge, a monument to Trajan's ambition and Rome's technical prowess, ensured that the final campaign against the Dacians would be supplied and reinforced until victory was absolute. It was the ultimate expression of Roman determination, carved in stone and timber. The initial invasion in 101 saw Roman columns push deep into Dacian territory. Trajan's multi-pronged advance was designed to overwhelm the enemy, but King Decebulus was a wily and resourceful opponent. he refused to meet the legions in a single, decisive, pitched battle. Instead, he used the terrain to his advantage, launching vicious ambushes from the dense forests and rocky defiles. The Dacians, with their terrifying curved swords, known as the falx, fought with a desperate ferocity. These weapons were capable of hooking shields or cleaving through Roman helmets, inflicting horrific wounds and striking fear into the hearts of even veteran legionaries. The campaign quickly devolved into a brutal and bloody struggle. Every valley gained and every hill taken came at a high cost. The Romans methodically advanced, capturing and burning smaller Dacian settlements, but Decibulus's main army remained elusive, melting back into the mountains only to reappear and strike where least expected. In one daring move, the Dacian king launched a massive counterattack across the Danube further downstream, striking into the Roman province of Moesia. This forced Trajan to halt his advance, rush a portion of his army south to repel the invasion and relieve the besieged Roman garrisons. Decibulus had proven he was a master strategist, capable of turning the tables on his invaders. The fighting in Moesia was fierce, taking place in the dead of winter. The Romans, caught by surprise, suffered heavy casualties in the initial onslaught. But Trajan's arrival stabilized the front. He led his men in a series of punishing battles that eventually broke the back of the Dacian invasion force. A famous scene, later immortalized on his column in Rome, shows the emperor himself tending to the wounded, tearing his own clothes for bandages. It was a moment that captured his deep sense of responsibility for his men. After securing the province, he returned his attention to the main front in Dacia, his resolve hardened by the enemy's audacity. By the end of the campaign season of 102, both sides were battered and exhausted. The Romans had pushed deep into Dacia and inflicted immense damage, but they had failed to capture the Dacian capital or destroy Decebalus's army. The Dacian king had lost vast swathes of territory and a significant number of his warriors, but he still held his mountain fortresses and remained defiant. The First Dacian War ended not with a bang, but with a tense, negotiated truce. Decibulus was forced to accept humiliating terms, but for Trajan it was clear that this was only a temporary peace. The war was not over. It was merely paused. Despite the grueling nature of the campaign, there were moments of clear Roman superiority. The most significant conventional battle of the First Dacian War took place at a mountain pass known as Tapai. This was a strategic gateway to the Dacian heartland, and Decibulus knew he had to make a stand there. He fortified the position and gathered a large part of his army, hoping to block Trajan's advance. The emperor, recognizing this as a rare opportunity to engage the main Dacian force, prepared his legions for a major assault. He was determined to break through the pass and prove the invincibility of Roman arms in open battle. The battle began under an ominous sky, with a thunderstorm breaking as the legions advanced. The Romans saw this as a sign of Jupiter's favor. Trajan orchestrated the attack with textbook precision. He used his auxiliary archers and catapults to rain missiles down on the Dacian fortifications, pinning the defenders down while his legionaries advanced under the protection of their famous testudo formation. They moved forward like an unstoppable iron glacier, deflecting the arrows and stones hurled down from the heights. The disciplined advance, a hallmark of the Roman army, was a terrifying sight for the less organized Dacian warriors. When the legions reached the Dacian lines, the fighting became a desperate, close-quarter struggle. The air was filled with the clash of steel, the splintering of shields, and the shouts of men. The legionaries, with their short, stabbing gladius swords, worked in tight, disciplined formations. They methodically pushed the Dacians back, their superior training and armour proving decisive. Trajan was in the thick of the action, moving along the lines, directing reserves and encouraging his men. His presence was a potent force, inspiring his soldiers to fight with even greater courage and determination against the fierce Dacians. After hours of brutal combat, the Dacian line finally broke. Their courage was not enough to overcome the relentless grinding pressure of the Roman legions. They fled in disarray back into the mountains, leaving thousands of their dead on the battlefield. The Romans had won a hard-fought but decisive victory. The Battle of Tapae was a major strategic and psychological blow to Decebalus. It shattered the myth of his invincibility and opened the road deeper into Dacia. While the war was far from over, Trajan had proven a crucial point. When the Dacians stood and fought a conventional battle, the legions of Rome would triumph. Following the victory at Tapae and a grueling campaign season, Decebalus knew he could not sustain the fight. His army was battered, his resources were dwindling, and the relentless Roman advance was choking his kingdom. In the year 102, he sent envoys to Trajan to sue for peace. The emperor, knowing his own army was also weary, and that the final push to Sarmizegetusa would be costly, agreed to terms. But this would be a peace designed to humiliate and cripple the Dacian king. It was a victor's peace, intended to make Decebalus a client, a servant of Rome. The war was over for now. Decebalus himself was forced to prostrate himself before Trajan in a formal ceremony of submission. His leading nobles had to do the same, kneeling before the emperor and the standards of the legions. The terms of the treaty were harsh and absolute. Decebalus had to tear down the walls of his fortresses, surrender all his Roman-made war machines, surrender his engineers, and give up all the territory the legions had conquered. Most humiliatingly, he had to align his foreign policy with that of Rome, effectively becoming a vassal of the empire he had fought so hard against. The annual subsidies were stopped. Dacia would no longer be paid, it would be controlled. Trajan returned to Rome in 103 to a hero's welcome. He celebrated a magnificent triumph, a grand parade through the streets of the capital to honor his victory. The procession was a stunning spectacle of Roman power. Long lines of captured Dacian nobles, captured Dacian warriors were paraded in chains. Wagons groaned under the weight of captured weapons, captured armor, and captured treasure. The legions, marching behind their emperor, were roared on by a grateful and ecstatic populace. Trajan was awarded the honorary title Dacicus by the Senate, forever linking his name with the conquest. For the people of Rome, victory was complete. Yet, in his heart, Trajan knew this was only an intermission. He knew a man like Decebalus, proud, cunning, and ambitious, would never truly submit. The king's humiliation was too great, his hatred for Rome too deep. The peace treaty was merely a chance for both sides to catch their breath, rearm, and prepare for the final, inevitable confrontation. Trajan had won the first war, but he understood that as long as Decebalus lived and breathed, the Dacian kingdom would remain a threat. He had granted peace, but he was already planning for the war that would end it all for good. The final act was yet to come. The final conquest of Dacia in 106 was not just a military victory, it was an economic event of staggering proportions. After King Decebalus took his own life rather than face capture, Roman forces located his legendary royal treasure. He had hidden it by diverting a river, burying the gold, and then returning the river to its course. The hoard was immense beyond all imagination. It was accumulated over generations, consisting of hundreds of thousands of pounds of gold and twice that amount in silver. The fortune was loaded onto wagons and transported back to Rome, representing the single largest influx of wealth the empire had ever seen. The Dacian gold flooded the Roman economy, transforming the state's finances overnight. This sudden, massive injection of capital had an immediate and profound effect. Trajan gave every single Roman citizen a handsome cash bonus. The gift ensured his immense popularity and public joy. He used the wealth to completely eliminate the state deficit and to fund public works and social programs on a massive scale. The spoils were not squirreled away in the imperial treasury nor lavished on the palace. Instead, Trajan reinvested the entirety back into the empire and its people, the dividend of victory, shared with all. The economic boom was palpable throughout Italy and the provinces. The influx stimulated trade, commerce, and construction. With the treasury overflowing, Trajan lowered taxes while increasing state spending, creating widespread prosperity. The Dacian gold funded pay and retirement bonuses for the legions, ensuring the continued loyalty of the army. It paid for new roads, aqueducts, and harbours across the empire, strengthening infrastructure. The conquest paid for itself many times over, proving war could be profitable under Trajan's efficiency. More than money, the gold was a symbol of Rome's absolute dominance, a tangible representation of victory and sacrifice. The sight of the treasure paraded through the streets during Trajan's triumph was supreme national pride. It silenced critics and showed the emperor delivered security and prosperity. This wealth from the mountains of Dacia became the stone, mortar and marble of Trajan's Rome, financing a building program that would forever alter the face of the capital city. With the treasury overflowing from the spoils of the Dacian wars, Trajan embarked on the most ambitious and magnificent construction project Rome had ever witnessed, a new imperial forum. This was to be his crowning achievement, a monument that would surpass all those built by his predecessors, including Augustus and Caesar. He once again turned to his genius architect, Apollodorus of Damascus, the man who had bridged the Danube. The task was, well, monumental. To create the necessary space next to the existing forums, a massive earthen ridge that connected the Capitoline and Quirinal hills had to be excavated and removed entirely. It was an engineering feat as audacious as the war itself, a literal reshaping of Rome's topography to make way for the emperor's vision. The Forum of Trajan was a breathtaking complex of unparalleled grandeur, designed to awe and inspire. One entered through a magnificent triumphal arch, which opened onto a vast porticoed piazza. At the center of this massive courtyard stood a colossal bronze equestrian statue of Trajan himself, a gleaming symbol of his authority. The piazza was flanked by colonnades, decorated with statues of captured Dacian noblemen, a constant reminder of the victory that funded this marvel. Unlike previous forums, which were primarily open spaces, Trajan's was a dense and layered complex of buildings, each more impressive than the last. It was not just a monument, it was the new administrative and cultural heart of the Roman Empire. Beyond the main piazza stood the Basilica Ulpia, a colossal hall of justice and commerce larger than a modern football field. Its cavernous interior was a forest of marble columns, supporting a gilded bronze roof, a space so vast it could hold thousands of people conducting business, attending law courts, or simply meeting with fellow citizens. Past the basilica were two library buildings, one for Greek texts and the other for Latin, housing the accumulated knowledge of the world. And nestled between these two libraries stood the forum's most iconic feature, Trajan's column. This incredible 126-foot-tall marble column was carved with a continuous spiral frieze, depicting the entire story of the Dacian Wars, a stone narrative of the campaign for all to see. This entire complex was a masterwork of propaganda, a permanent celebration of Trajan's achievements. Every element, from the captured Dacian statues to the column's detailed reliefs, served to glorify the emperor and his conquest. Atop the column, a statue of Trajan stood, looking out over the city he had transformed. The inscription at its base proudly declared that it was built to show how high the hill had been that was cleared away for the construction. The Forum of Trajan was more than a building project. It was a statement of power, a gift to the people of Rome, and a legacy in stone that would ensure the name of the Optimus Princeps would echo through eternity. Adjacent to his grand forum, Trajan and his architect Apollodorus created another equally revolutionary structure, the Markets of Trajan. This was not a monument to imperial glory, but a marvel of public utility. Carved directly into the newly excavated slope of the Coronal Hill, the markets were the world's first large-scale, multi-level shopping centre. This sprawling complex of brick and concrete was a testament to Roman engineering and Trajan's practical concern for the city's commercial life. It was a bustling, labyrinthine hub of activity, a city within a city dedicated entirely to commerce, administration, and the daily needs of the Roman people. It was a structure for the common man, not just the elite. The design was, honestly, ingenious. A great semicircular facade of brick-faced concrete rose up against the hill, containing dozens of small shops, or tabernae, on its ground floor. These shops opened onto the Forum Piazza and sold all manner of goods, from exotic foods and spices to textiles and pottery. Above this, a series of terraced levels, connected by internal stairways and corridors, housed more shops, offices, and administrative centres. The highlight was the Great Hall, a massive barrel-vaulted indoor space that soared several stories high. Sunlight streamed in through clerestory windows, illuminating a vast hall where grain was likely distributed as part of the public dole, shielding the transaction from the wind and rain. The markets served a vital function in the life of the city. They provided a centralized and organized location for commerce, moving many of the chaotic street vendors into a purpose-built, efficient space. The upper levels housed the offices of imperial officials who likely managed the forum and the city's vast supply networks. It was here that the business of the empire was carried out on a daily basis. For the average Roman, the markets were a place to shop, to conduct business, to meet friends, and to receive their free grain ration. The complex was a constant hum of activity, its corridors filled with the sounds of merchants hawking their wares and the chatter of 1,000 daily transactions. Like the forum it bordered, the markets of Trajan showcased the genius of Apollodorus and the ambition of his emperor. The innovative use of concrete allowed for the creation of vast, open interior spaces with soaring, vaulted ceilings, a feat that would have been impossible with traditional stone and timber construction. The entire project was a masterpiece of urban planning, seamlessly integrating a monumental space with a practical commercial hub. It was another example of Trajan's focus on projects that were not only beautiful and impressive, but also served the concrete needs of his people, improving their daily lives and the functioning of his capital. Trajan's greatness not only measured in stone and marble, but also in his profound commitment to the welfare of his people. The most celebrated of his social policies was the Alimenta, a state-sponsored child support program he massively expanded using the profits from his wars. This system was not simply a handout, it was a clever investment in the future of Italy. The state loaned large sums of money to Italian landowners at a low rate of interest. The interest payments from these loans were then funneled directly into local municipalities, which used the funds to provide food, education for poor children and orphan children. It was honestly a self-sustaining cycle of social good. This program was a manifestation of the emperor's role as Pater Patriae, the father of the fatherland. It ensured the next generation of Roman citizens and soldiers would be healthier, better fed and more loyal to the state that had cared for them in their youth. Inscriptions from towns across Italy attest to the widespread implementation and success, recording the names of children who benefited from the emperor's generosity. This was a deeply personal policy for Trajan, who was childless himself. He became, in effect, a father to the children of Italy, securing the demographic and military strength of the empire's heartland for generations to come. Alongside the Alimenta, Trajan devoted enormous resources to securing the cura annoni, the grain supply that was the lifeline of Rome. An interruption to this supply could lead to famine and riots, a constant source of anxiety for previous emperors. Trajan tackled this problem with his characteristic thoroughness. He commissioned the construction of a massive new hexagonal harbour at Portus, near Ostia. This inner basin provided a vast sheltered anchorage for the great grain ships arriving from Egypt and from Africa, protecting them from storms and allowing for much more efficient unloading. This engineering marvel guaranteed a stable year-round supply of grain for the capital, no matter the weather. These two programs, the Alimenta and the reinforcement of the Annona, reveal the core of Trajan's governing philosophy. He understood that the power of the empire rested not just on the strength of its legions, but on the well-being and stability of its people. His policies were practical, far-sighted, and compassionate. He was not just a conqueror who brought back gold. He was a statesman who used that gold to build a more secure and prosperous society. The common people of Rome and Italy loved him not just for his victories and grand buildings, but for the simple fact that under his rule, their children were fed and their city was safe from hunger. The era of peace and prosperity ushered in by Trajan's victories and wise governance created a climate of supreme confidence that honestly permeated every aspect of Roman life. With the frontiers secure and the treasury full, culture and the arts flourished. Writers and historians, Tacitus and Pliny the Younger, in a sunlit library with a bust of Trajan, who had lived in fear under Domitian's oppressive regime, could now write with a newfound freedom and honesty. They praised Trajan not as fawning courtiers, but as genuinely admiring intellectuals who saw in him the embodiment of the ideal ruler. Their works, which provide much of what we know about the period, reflect an age of optimism and restored faith in the imperial system. This confidence was reflected in the law and administration of the empire. Trajan's reign was known for its fairness and good governance. His correspondence with provincial governors, most famously with Pliny the Younger, reveals a ruler who was meticulous, just, and deeply engaged in administration. He set a high standard for his officials, demanding integrity and a commitment to the welfare of the provincials. This sense of justice and order radiated outwards from Rome, creating a period of stability and good government across the vast expanse of the empire. Citizens from Hispania to Syria felt the benefits of being ruled by the Optimus Princeps. The architectural revolution under Trajan was perhaps the most visible sign of this golden age. It was not confined to Rome alone. Across the empire, cities built new forums, theatres, aqueducts and temples, often with financial support from the emperor. This was an age of builders, driven by a belief in the permanence and perfection of the Roman world. The technical mastery of Roman engineers, as seen in projects like the bridge over the Danube and the Forum in Rome, was at its absolute peak. They built structures of a scale and complexity that would not be seen again for over 1,000 years, a physical manifestation of the era's boundless ambition and self-assurance. Ultimately, Trajan's reign represented the Roman Empire at its zenith. It was a moment when the empire reached its greatest territorial extent. Its economy was at its most prosperous, its government was at its most just, and its people were at their most confident. Trajan had healed the wounds of tyranny, vanquished Rome's enemies, and used the spoils of victory to build a better world for his citizens. This was the Pax Romana in its fullest, most glorious expression. The Golden Age was not a myth or an exaggeration. It was a tangible reality, forged by a soldier emperor who proved to be the best ruler Rome had ever known. Having secured Dacia and enriched Rome, Trajan, now in his 60s, could have rested on his laurels as the most successful emperor in Roman history. But, the spirit of a conqueror is not easily quieted. His gaze turned east towards the Parthian Empire. Driven by a desire to emulate Alexander the Great and to solve the eastern frontier once and for all, Trajan embarked on one last colossal campaign. In the year 114, he marched east with a massive army, aiming to conquer Parthia and reach the Persian Gulf. The initial stages of the campaign were a stunning success, a testament to Trajan's enduring military genius. He annexed Armenia, turning it into a Roman province. He then swept south into Mesopotamia, the heartland of the Parthian realm. The great city of Babylon fell before his legions. Seleucia fell, and Ctesiphon, the Parthian capital, fell as well. It was a breathtaking advance that pushed the Roman eagles farther east than they had ever been. Trajan stood on the shores of the Persian Gulf, a Roman emperor looking out towards India, and reputedly lamented that he was too old to follow in Alexander's footsteps any further. It was the absolute zenith of Roman territorial expansion, a fleeting moment when the empire seemed to have no limits. However, the victory was a fragile one. The conquered territories were vast, hostile, and difficult to hold. As Trajan dreamed of further conquests, the lands behind him erupted in a widespread revolt. The Parthians, though defeated in open battle, began a fierce guerrilla war. Jewish populations across the eastern provinces rose up in a massive rebellion. The aging emperor found his supply lines cut and his legions bogged down in a brutal counterinsurgency. The war of glorious conquest had devolved into a grim struggle for survival. The strain of the campaign took a heavy toll on the emperor's health. He suffered a stroke and his strength began to fail him. Recognizing that his great eastern adventure was unraveling and that his own life was nearing its end, a gravely ill Trajan decided to return to Rome. He left his general, Hadrian, in command of the eastern armies and began the long journey home. He would never see the capital again. His health deteriorated rapidly, and in August of the year 117, in the city of Selinus in Cilicia, on the coast of what is now Turkey, the great conqueror, the builder, the Optimus Princeps, died. The news of his death sent a shockwave across the empire. The man who had seemed an unstoppable force of nature, who had defined an entire generation of Roman power and confidence, was gone. The sun had set on Rome's greatest emperor. Trajan's immediate successor, his adopted son Hadrian, made the pragmatic decision to abandon the costly and untenable conquests in Mesopotamia, wisely consolidating the empire's borders. Yet this withdrawal did nothing to diminish Trajan's legendary status. His death was mourned throughout the empire not as a tyrant to be feared, but as a father to be missed. The Senate officially deified him, and his ashes were placed in a golden urn in the base of his magnificent column in Rome, an unprecedented honor, bringing an emperor's final resting place within the sacred boundaries of the city. He had left an indelible mark not just on the map, but on the very soul of the Roman world. His legacy was, first and foremost, one of peak Roman power. He had expanded the empire to its greatest geographical extent, and while some of those gains were temporary, his conquest of Dacia was permanent and profoundly important, providing security and immense wealth for generations. His monumental building projects, the Forum, the markets, the harbour at Portus, reshaped the capital and stood for centuries as testaments to the glory of his reign. He was the benchmark against which all future emperors would be measured. For centuries to come, new emperors would be inaugurated with the hopeful prayer, Felicior Augusto, Melia Traiano, be luckier than Augustus and better than Trajan. To be better than Trajan was the ultimate, almost unattainable aspiration. Beyond the conquests and the constructions, his most enduring legacy was the ideal of the Optimus Princeps itself. He had created a new model for what a good emperor should be. He demonstrated that a ruler could be an absolute autocrat while still governing with justice, moderation, and a genuine concern for the welfare of his people. He respected the Senate, provided for the poor, and commanded the unwavering loyalty of the army, not through fear, but through shared hardship and mutual respect. He proved that an emperor could come from the provinces, and that the empire was a shared enterprise, not just the property of the city of Rome. In the grand tapestry of Roman history, Trajan's rule shines as a golden age of confidence, prosperity, and unparalleled might. He was the soldier emperor who embodied the traditional Roman virtues of duty, discipline, and honor. He took an empire shaken by tyranny and through his strength and character led it to its zenith. He was the conqueror who secured the frontiers, the builder who glorified the capital, and the father who cared for his people. More than a ruler, Trajan became a legend, a symbol of the Roman Empire at its most powerful and its most just, a legacy in stone and story that continues to inspire awe to this very day.